So, what are Europe, European rearmament, and largely Spain up to again? The Spanish foreign minister is calling for an EU army because we can't wake up every morning wondering what the US will do next. Right now, the United States is negotiating with Iran about how this war will end, and the problem is that Iran is acting as if it's winning the war, and it seems that for now it has the ability to act this way, since there is information telling us that the United States has used up a huge amount of its supplies in this war. Therefore, it's very unlikely that the United States would start, renew, or intensify the war in the near future. But there's also a bit of a problem in that some European countries, like Spain, were against this war from the beginning. And right now, Spain is calling for Europe to be stronger so that it can be more independent from the United States. They say that making Europe stronger or even creating a European army would not in any way break up NATO. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know more, if you want to know what the deal is with a European army, whether it would break up NATO or not, how this could or couldn't work, and also whether Spain might be a bit of a free rider and a hypocrite, and if you want to hear how Germany, Ukraine, or even Poland are currently working to increase not only their own defense capabilities, but also those of Europe, then keep watching this video. And for those of you who want to know more, welcome. I would probably start with Spain. It's quite interesting that Spain is speaking up here because the Spanish foreign minister is saying how much Spain believes in the Atlantic Alliance, how much Spain wants this, how much Spain wants a strong Europe, and how much it wants a strong NATO, and how it wants NATO to have a deterrent capability, and how it bothers him that Trump is criticizing NATO and things like that. And in this regard, the Spanish people and the Spanish government are absolutely right. Yes, Trump is damaging the alliance, weakening it, and in a way increasing the likelihood that the structure of the alliance and its cohesion could be tested. In other words, Trump, with his statements, is increasing the likelihood of a major war in Europe. That is absolutely true. At the same time, the Spanish are right that the attack by the United States on Iran, as it was carried out, was absolutely, completely wrong. We've already discussed many times what this caused, so I won't repeat myself here, but for example, just the fact that it was poorly planned, poorly prepared, and that the whole attack in Iran only brought more radical and worse people to power than those who were there originally, I think that perfectly represents the whole situation. What I really don't like and what really bothers me is that this argument is coming from Spain of all places. Spain, which spends extremely little on its own defense budget. Spain, which is a free rider. Spain, which helps Ukraine very little and contributes to collective defense not only in NATO but also in the European Union. It's exactly this Spain that's lecturing us here about how Europe should have its own army. That is absolutely unacceptable. Spain has absolutely no right to say this. Who has the right to say this? Poland has the right to say it. France has the right to say it. Germany has the right to say it, as it is the biggest supporter of Ukraine in Europe. France has the right to say it. Finland, which has perfectly managed both civil and military defense, a lot of countries have the right to say that. Spain, but also, for example, the Czech Republic, should keep a low profile and hope that no one notices their woefully inadequate approach to defense, because what they're doing here, what they're saying here, and what they're pushing for with the European army and a stronger Europe, it sounds like they want to be more independent from that nasty Trump who tells them how bad they are and how they should support defense more, but they themselves don't want to do anything at all for defense. They're just freeloaders from start to finish who want to ride along with Europe, with the European army, with a stronger Europe, but they don't want to listen to the mean Trump who scolds them for it. The Spaniards, and especially their government, are honestly total rats, like unbelievable rats, who don't fulfill their commitments, do nothing for the protection of Europe, nor for the North Atlantic Alliance, nor to help Ukraine, nor to support the European army, which without a doubt is the Ukrainian army right now, but they will want to establish a European army here. Well, not a chance, ladies and gentlemen, not a chance. But the European army, in its very essence, isn't a bad idea. It would definitely make sense not only to strengthen the European states themselves, but also to strengthen the bond between European states, so that Europe would be more independent from the decisions made by the United States, so that Europe would be able to provide for its own defense even if the United States did not come to help. That means, above all, strengthening a European navy and developing European nuclear weapons. By the way, what we're weakest in isn't infantry strength. It's actually not even the Air Force. And in the end, it's not even armored strength. Really facing Russia, we are weakest in nuclear deterrence, in the ability to launch nuclear-armed missiles at Russia and thus prevent Russia from attacking at all. As for the Navy, it's weak, not weak against Russia, but weak when it comes to asserting European interests, for example, in the Red Sea, the Malacca Strait, or even in the Strait of Hormuz. We definitely have a weak Navy. When it comes to protecting Europe from Russian ships, our Navy is sufficient. When it comes to the Air Force, the European Air Force is sufficient. When it comes to ground forces, European ground forces, tanks, infantry, there are enough of them. What's more important is coordination, joint command, and the will to deploy them. In this regard, in the Air Force, Navy, and in infantry and ground forces, we are stronger than the Russians. If we are able to coordinate and deploy together, we are stronger. Where we are weaker is in nuclear deterrence and missile systems. In that, we are weaker and we need to work on it. All of Europe should cooperate on that. Honestly, I think there should be nuclear weapons that are shared across all of Europe. That's how it should be. Or maybe France should increase the number of its nuclear weapons deployed across Europe, and European partners would contribute money for that, for example. In this regard, I agree with the Spaniards, but for the Spaniards who contribute the least to our common defense to be the ones saying that that's very, very rude. Otherwise, as for the concern that a European army, European rearmament, and European identity would undermine NATO, well, if NATO is just a project through which the United States wants to project its power around the world and use us as vassals, then at that moment it would indeed undermine NATO. If the United States is sincere about its membership in NATO and wants to strengthen both itself and at the same time be a strong element for Europe as such, then a stronger Europe in no way undermines NATO, right? Only if we were to say that NATO is a tool for the United States to project its own power, which, as we saw in Iran, is not entirely the case, then at that moment it would undermine NATO. But if the United States can understand that Europe is not their lapdog, then this does not undermine NATO. So that's that. Well, we've already discussed how the Spanish are rude and how the Spanish are pushing for a European army without actually participating in that European army. Now let's talk about how the European army is finally and truly coming into existence here, and who is contributing to it the most. So first of all, of course, the Ukrainians are contributing to it. It needs to be said that the Ukrainian army is, to a large extent, a European army. Ukrainians are Europeans, without a doubt, armed mainly with European weapons, without a doubt, and trained mainly by European military instructors, without a doubt. They use European military tactics, without a doubt, which they enrich with their own experiences, for example, in drone warfare, without a doubt. Without a doubt, the Ukrainian army is currently a European army, which is actively waging war against Russia, and from which European states draw know-how, such as the Latvians, who will cooperate more with the Ukrainian army on anti-drone defense. And that's because a few stray drones, disoriented by Russian air defense, ended up in Latvia and hit local infrastructure. Overall, this is a very good cooperation that can significantly increase Latvia's air defense and counter-drone capability, but the incidents themselves and Latvia's inability to defend against stray drones have caused a coalition and government crisis in Latvia, which Latvia now has to respond to. So, in this respect, it's not very pleasant, but if they can withstand this crisis, if they can solve it, Latvia will come out of it as a country that learns from the crisis and gains anti-drone experience from it. As for Poland now, Poland is of course another important country that significantly contributes to the defense of Europe. It doesn't supply such a large amount of weapons to Ukraine anymore, but it is arming itself at home and gaining experience and capabilities from Ukraine. That means they are increasing the deterrent capability of European states, the European Union, and Europe as a whole. In contrast to Trump, who is breaking up NATO, and the Spaniards, who are not strengthening NATO due to their incompetence, the Poles are increasing the deterrent capability of the European bloc. And they will increase it even more because they take drone and anti-drone capabilities really seriously. At this moment, they have about 5,000 drones in their armed forces, which are mainly used for training purposes. And they want to integrate the army much more closely with civilian drone operators because the army really has a problem right now with not having enough drones for training, and they would like to train their soldiers much more, so they will use the civilian sector to help their army improve in drone training. So another thing that's quite interesting is the cooperation between Ukraine and Germany, and overall German activity in Ukraine. Because, for example, a large number of defense innovations that the Germans and Ukrainians have agreed on, or the fact that Germany will allocate 10 million euros to create training centers all over Ukraine. This is a big help. And yet, even though the German army is not in shape at the moment, they are trying to get into shape, they are trying to improve it, they are working on it, they are investing money, time, energy, and people into it. So Germany has taken a step in the right direction when it comes to the defense of Europe. But at this moment, they are not where they want to be yet. And so they are doing what they can to defend Europe, and they are defending it precisely through the European army in Ukraine. And they do that, for example, by investing directly in defense in Ukraine or investing in the training of Ukrainian European soldiers in the war against Russia, which European Ukraine is defending itself against. It's interesting because the Germans are involved in the training of more than 27,000 Ukrainian soldiers. So they are contributing, even if just a small part, but they are contributing to this joint European Ukraine, the European defense that the Ukrainians are building. And it's not just the small amounts, those few tens of millions that the Germans have invested in training centers. It's also hundreds of millions of euros that the Germans have invested without talking about it everywhere. Overall, it appears that Germany invested in the Czech ammunition initiative, that is, the initiative that was supposed to supply 155 and 122 millimeter artillery shells to the Ukrainian battlefield, about 300 million euros more than they declared. It's probably because the German government is trying to keep a bit of a secret about how much they're putting into it, and maybe they're also trying to hide the fact that overall investments in that defense initiative are actually decreasing. This is a graph showing how many artillery shells the Germans have delivered or paid for. As you can see, the trend is going down. But it's important to realize that this downward trend is happening all across Europe. Overall, the Czech ammunition initiative is slowly dying. The interest in putting money into it and buying that ammunition is getting lower and lower. But that's also because it has more or less already fulfilled its historical role. And now, for example, Rheinmetall or German arms manufacturers in general, but also Czech and Slovak arms manufacturers themselves, are starting to have the ability to produce their own ammunition. And it doesn't depend so much anymore on the initiative that imports ammunition from third countries. But the European countries themselves and European arms manufacturers are starting up their own production and are replacing the ammunition from third countries with their own ammunition. So in this respect, the Czech ammunition initiative has fulfilled and continues to fulfill its historic role. But the role of this initiative is gradually declining. It is gradually declining, maybe declining faster than it would have to, given that the Czech Republic has stopped contributing to this initiative, has stopped properly addressing it, and supposedly, according to what the new government says, we're only sort of coordinating it right now. But of course, the Czech ammunition initiative was not something endless. It was not something that would never stop. It was simply a kind of stopgap measure where we needed to buy time for Ukraine and buy time for Europe so that we could start our own production. Besides that, what's also interesting about this is, for example, if you remember the Nemesis drones, which involved people like Fultin, Ondra Vecchi, and General Žeka, the Nemesis organization was supposed to supply drones to Ukraine. At this point, any delivery of drones to Ukraine is of course commendable, but Ukraine is already producing such a huge number of its own drones that delivering drones in numbers less than in the millions is more or less just a drop in the ocean. It's similar with ammunition production, by the way. So, the import of ammunition and all these things is decreasing, but much more important than now, importing more ammunition, more drones, and more of this external help when it comes to these basic weapons, is the fact that Germany continues to provide a fairly large number of air defense systems, and at the same time there is this massive 90 billion loan, which will allow Ukraine to buy more weapons, produce its own weapons at home, and develop its arms industry in cooperation with other European countries. So now there is greater independence, there is greater self-sufficiency, for example, when it comes to artillery ammunition or drone ammunition, which also helps advance the joint European defense, the joint European army, which at this moment is embodied by the Ukrainian army, and to which, this brings us nicely back, Spain contributes almost nothing. So maybe the Spanish could start by sending weapons to Ukraine, by sending shells to Ukraine, by increasing their own arms production at home, so they can provide more to the European army in Ukraine, and only then talk about wanting to establish a European army. That's how it is. Ladies and gentlemen, please write to me what you think about this. Send your comments if you're interested in this topic. Post your comments below. Like, share, help boost the visibility if you enjoy this content and want to support independent media. Here are QR codes you can use to send a direct payment. And how will this benefit you? It will benefit you in the sense that together we will influence society, which might be less inclined toward Russia, and by doing so, we reduce the likelihood of a third world war and the occupation of the Czech Republic, which I think is quite a nice return. So that's it. Have a great day, and we'll keep going. Watch more videos and join the streams.